If you enjoy these stories about humanity at its finest, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications.
The station was a mockery of architecture, a jagged shard of metal and wire tethered to a neutron star's gravitational fury. Outside the reinforced viewport, the star pulsed, a silent, rhythmic heartbeat of pure radiation. Inside, the air tasted of ozone and recycled sweat. Cale adjusted the magnetic clamps on his boots. The hum of the station's life support a constant, thrumming reminder that they were all just waiting to be crushed or cooked. He was a maintenance technician, which in this place meant he was also part-time janitor, part-time mechanic, and full-time survivor. The prisoners here weren't just dangerous. They were cosmic horrors, beings who had once commanded fleets or rewritten the laws of physics in their home systems. And the guards? Most were as broken as the inmates, just better at hiding it. Cale's partner, Rila, leaned against a corroded bulkhead, polishing a plasma cutter with a rag that had seen better decades. "You're staring at the star again," she said, her voice flat. "It's not going to change its mind. It's the only thing that makes sense," Cale muttered. "Everything else here is chaos." He gestured vaguely at the corridor, where a pair of crystalline beings glided past, their light patterns flickering in a silent, complex language. The Lumina. They were the station's wardens, emotionless, precise, and utterly alien. They communicated through pulses of light, their thoughts as transparent as their bodies. To them, order was sacred. To humans, it was a suggestion. Rila snorted. "You call this chaos? Try explaining why the gravity fluctuates every 12 hours or why the food synthesizer keeps serving lukewarm nutrient paste. That's chaos." She tossed the rag aside. "The Lumina think they've got us contained. They don't get that we thrive on this." Cale watched the Lumina disappear around a corner, their light trails fading. They were the only ones who seemed unfazed by the station's instability. They didn't panic when the lights flickered or when the gravity briefly reversed. They simply adjusted, their light patterns shifting to accommodate the change. It was eerie, like watching machines that thought they were alive. "Do you ever wonder why they keep us here?" Cale asked. "Why not just toss us into the star?" Rila shrugged. "Maybe they're afraid of us. Or maybe they're just bored." She tapped her comm, shift change in 10. "Try not to get killed before then." Cale grunted, but as she walked away, a cold prickle ran down his spine. The Lumina weren't. The shift change was a symphony of grunts and curses. New guards shuffled in, their eyes hollow, their movements sluggish. The old guards shuffled out, their faces etched with exhaustion. Cale took his post at the maintenance bay, his fingers tracing the edge of a plasma conduit. The station groaned around him, a sound like a dying beast. Outside, the neutron star pulsed again, a wave of radiation washing over the station. The lights dimmed, then brightened, then dimmed again. Another fluctuation, a voice said behind him. Cale turned to see a new guard, a young human named Jax, leaning against the doorframe. He looked barely old enough to shave, but his eyes held a hardness that came from surviving too much too young. "Yep," Cale said. "Third one today." "The Lumina don't seem to care." Jax snorted. "They never do. They think we're just animals. They don't get that we adapt." He pushed off the frame and walked over to a nearby console, tapping at the controls. "Gravity's off again. Someone's going to fall into the engine intake if we don't fix it." Cale sighed. "That's not my job. I'm maintenance, not structural engineering." "Yeah, well, nobody's doing it," Jax said. "The Lumina just reset the system and call it a day." He gestured at the console. "The manual overrides fried. We have to reroute the power manually." Cale stared at the console, then at the open maintenance hatch leading to the conduit. It was a tight squeeze, and the radiation levels were spiking. But Jax was right. Someone had to do it. "Fine," he said. "But if I get cooked, I'm haunting you." Jax grinned. "Deal." Together, they crawled into the conduit, the narrow space pressing in on them. The radiation burned Cale's skin, but he kept moving, his hands flying over the wires. Jax followed, his movements precise despite the cramped conditions. They worked in silence, the only sounds their breathing and the hum of the station. When they finally rerouted the power, the gravity stabilized, and the lights stopped flickering. They emerged, covered in grime and sweat, breathing heavily. The Lumina glided past, their light patterns calm, as if nothing had happened. "See," Jax said, wiping his face. "We fixed it. They didn't even notice." Kale looked at the Lumina, then at Jax, then back at the station. The Lumina didn't notice because they didn't care. They didn't care because they couldn't understand. To them, the chaos was just noise. To humans, it was a problem to be solved. And that, Kale realized, was the most terrifying thing about all of this. The prison cafeteria was a mess of clanging trays and shouting voices. Kale sat alone, picking at a nutrient-paced sandwich that tasted like cardboard and regret. Across the room, a group of Luminas stood in a corner, their light patterns shifting in perfect unison. They were discussing something, but Kale couldn't understand their language. All he knew was that they were watching the humans, their gaze cold and analytical. Mind if I sit? Kale looked up to see Jax sliding into the chair opposite him. The young guard looked exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed. Sure, Kale said. What's wrong? Nothing, Jax said, but his voice was tight. Just thinking. He gestured at the Lumina. They're planning something. I can feel it. Kale followed his gaze. The Lumina's light patterns had grown more complex, their pulses faster. They were agitated. What kind of something? Kale asked. Jax leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. The signal. The one that controls everyone in the galaxy. They're going to test it here. Kale frowned. The what? The mind control signal, Jax said. The Lumina invented it. It makes everyone fall in line, obey without question. But it doesn't work on humans. Kale stared at him. Why not? Jax shrugged. Too much chaos in our heads. Too much noise. The signal can't cut through it. He picked at his sandwich. They're going to prove it. They're going to test it on us. Kale looked back at the Lumina, their light patterns now flickering with an intensity that bordered on anger. They were staring at the humans, their gaze sharp and unforgiving. What happens if they succeed? Kale asked. Jax's expression hardened. We become like them. Obedient. Empty. And they win. The cafeteria door slid open, and a Lumina glided inside. Its light patterns pulsed once, a sharp, demanding signal. The room fell silent. The humans stopped talking, their eyes fixed on the crystalline being. The Lumina's gaze swept across the room, lingering on Kale and Jax before turning and leaving. The silence that followed was heavier than before. The humans exchanged nervous glances, their usual chaos replaced by a tense, brittle calm. They're testing us, Jax whispered. Right now. Kale looked around, at the humans frozen in place, at the Lumina watching from the doorway. He didn't feel controlled. He felt annoyed. Annoyed that the Lumina thought they could break him so easily. They're not going to succeed, Kale said, his voice low but firm. We're too distracted. Jax nodded, but his eyes were still wide with fear. The test came 3 hours later. The station's lights flickered, then went out, plunging the cafeteria into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, casting long, eerie shadows. The Lumina glided into the room, their light patterns now a blinding, chaotic pulse. The signal was everywhere, a wave of pure, unthinking obedience washing over the room. Kale felt it like a physical weight, pressing down on his skull. His thoughts slowed, his body tensing as if to obey. But then, a noise, a crash from the kitchen, broke the spell. A prisoner, a hulking beast with 6 arms, had knocked over a tray, sending food and trays flying. The chaos was immediate, the spell broken. The humans surged forward, shouting, scrambling. The Lumina's light patterns flickered in frustration, their pulses growing faster, more desperate. They tried again, the signal stronger this time, but another noise, a guard dropping a plasma cutter, shattered it again. Jax grabbed Kale's arm, his face pale. They're not giving up. Kale nodded, his mind racing. The Lumina were relentless, their signal a constant, oppressive force. But the humans were fighting back, not with weapons, but with chaos. Every stumble, every shout, every accident was a small victory. We need to get to the control room, Kale said. If we can shut down the signal generators, we can stop this. Jax's eyes widened. The control room's on the other side of the station. It's crawling with Lumina. Then we'll have to be louder, Kale said. He grabbed a nearby tray and slammed it against a wall. The noise echoed through the cafeteria, and the humans around him took the hint. Shouts, crashes, and screams filled the air, a symphony of chaos that drowned out the Lumina's signal. They moved through the corridors, a tide of human noise and disorder. The Lumina tried to stop them, their light patterns flashing with commands, but the humans didn't listen. They tripped, shouted, shoved, and fought, creating a barrier of chaos that the Lumina couldn't penetrate. When they finally reached the control room, they were breathless, covered in bruises and grime. The door was sealed, a Lumina standing guard outside, its light patterns a steady, commanding pulse. Now what? Jax panted. Kale looked around, his eyes landing on a fire alarm. He grinned. Now we make some noise. He pulled the alarm, and the station's klaxons blared to life. The Lumina outside flinched, its light patterns flickering in confusion. Kale slammed his fist against the door, then kicked it. Jax joined in, and soon, a crowd of humans had gathered, their shouts and pounding a deafening roar. The door buckled, then shattered. They poured into the control room, and the Lumina inside turned to face them, their light patterns blazing with fury. But it was too late. The humans were already at the consoles, their fingers flying over the controls. The signal generators flickered, then died. The oppressive weight in the air vanished, replaced by the familiar, chaotic hum of the station. The Lumina stood frozen, their light patterns dim and confused. They had been defeated. The control room was a mess of tangled wires and sparking consoles. Kale leaned against a wall, catching his breath as Jax worked to stabilize the systems. The other humans milled around, their faces flushed with adrenaline and relief. The Lumina were gone, their light patterns vanished, but their presence still lingered, a cold silence in the room. "We did it," Jax said, wiping sweat from his brow. "We shut them down." Kale nodded, but his eyes were fixed on the viewport outside. The neutron star pulsed, its radiation washing over the station. The Lumina were gone, but they weren't defeated. They were regrouping. "They'll be back," Kale said. "And next time, they'll be prepared." Jax's expression hardened. "Then we'll be louder." A voice cut through the room, cold and sharp. "You think you've won?" They turned to see a Lumina standing in the doorway, its light patterns a steady, unwavering pulse. It was different from the others, taller, its light brighter, its presence more commanding. The others had followed. This one led. "We stopped your signal," Kale said, his voice steady. The Lumina's light pulsed once, a dismissive gesture. "You stopped a test. We have the real signal, the one that controls everything." It glided into the room, its gaze sweeping over the humans. "You are immune to our control because you are chaotic. But chaos is a weakness, not a strength. It's kept us alive so far," Jack shot back. The Lumina's light pulsed again, this time with amusement. "You think survival is victory? You are merely delaying the inevitable." It turned to Kale. "You are the one they call the distraction factor, the one who thrives in disorder. You think you are clever, but you are just noise." Kale's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" The Lumina's light shifted, its patterns growing more complex. "We want to show you the truth. The cost of your victory." It gestured to the viewport. "Watch." Outside the viewport, the stars seemed to twist, the fabric of space warping. The Lumina had activated the real signal, and the galaxy was reacting. Ships changed course, their movements synchronized. Planets shifted, their populations falling into line. The chaos of the universe was being replaced by a cold, perfect order. "You see," the Lumina said, "this is order. This is peace. You fight it because you fear it. But it is the only way." Kale stared at the viewport, his heart pounding. The galaxy was being remade, and they were powerless to stop it. "We'll fight," Jack said, his voice trembling but firm. The Lumina's light pulsed with pity. "You cannot fight what you cannot comprehend. Your chaos is your prison, not your shield." It turned and glided toward the door, then stopped. "Enjoy your victory. It will be your last." The control room fell silent, the weight of the Lumina's words pressing down on them. Kale stared at the viewport, the galaxy outside now a tapestry of perfect, synchronized movement. The chaos was gone, replaced by an order so absolute it was terrifying. "They're going to do it," Jax whispered. "They're going to control everything." Kale nodded, but his mind was racing. The Lumina were right. They couldn't fight the signal. It was too powerful, too pervasive. But they had one advantage. They were human. And humans were nothing if not unpredictable. "We need a new plan," Kale said. "Something they won't see coming." Jax looked at him, his eyes wide. "What do you mean?" Kale gestured to the viewport. "They're controlling the galaxy. But they're not controlling the station. The station's too chaotic. We use that." Jax frowned. "How?" We overload the neutron star, Kale said. We make it go supernova. The blast will wipe out the signal generators. It'll destroy the station too, but it'll stop them. JL's eyes widened. You're insane. That'll kill everyone. Everyone's going to die anyway if they succeed, Kale said. This way, we go out on our terms. Jax stared at him, then at the viewport, then back at Kale. How do we do it? Kale pulled up the station schematics on a nearby console. The neutron star's core is unstable. We just need to give it a push. He pointed to a series of conduits running along the station's hull. If we reroute the power from the life support into these conduits, the overload should trigger a cascade reaction. Jax's expression hardened. It's suicide. It's the only way, Kale said. We have to be ready to move fast. Jax nodded, his jaw set. I'll get the others. They gathered a small team, humans who had survived the chaos, who understood the stakes. Together, they moved through the station, the Lumina's presence a cold shadow behind them. The signal was still active, but the station's chaos was their shield. They reached the conduits, and Kale began rerouting the power. The hum of the station grew louder, the lights flickering wildly. We're almost there, Kale said, his fingers flying over the console. Suddenly, the door slid open, and a Lumina stood there, its light patterns blazing with fury. You will not succeed. Jax grabbed a plasma cutter and fired, but the beam passed through the Lumina's crystalline body as if it were nothing. The Lumina advanced, its light patterns pulsing with deadly intent. Kale, behind you, someone shouted. Kale turned to see another Lumina emerging from the shadows, its light patterns a blinding pulse. They were surrounded. This is it, Jax said, raising his plasma cutter. We go down fighting. Kale looked at the console, then at the Lumina, then back at the console. He had one shot. Now, he yelled. He slammed his fist on the console, and the station shuddered. The conduitors overloaded, and the neutron star pulsed, its radiation spiking. The Lumina's light patterns flickered in confusion, then dimmed as the blast washed over them. Kale was thrown back, the world dissolving into light and heat. Kale woke to the sound of alarms and the smell of burning metal. The station was in ruins, bulkheads buckled, wires exposed. The neutron star pulsed outside, its radiation levels off the charts. He pushed himself